The Sunroom journey has completely changed my perception, definition, idea of success. That moment where you can take everything that you've learned over that 5-year period and go on to do whatever you want to do next is the most liberating feeling I've ever had in my career. We thought we could take it so much further. We thought it could be an OnlyFans competitor. There's that side that's like, oh, we couldn't do it. But then there's the other side that's like, but we did it for so many women. Creators earning like $500,000 on Sunroom. We had creators quitting their jobs, putting themselves through college, paying their rent, their car insurance. I think like taking risks really pays off, and it does not matter if your risk is a win or a loss.
Hello and welcome back to Wild Hearts. I am Maddy Guest, part of the investment team here at Blackbird, and I am taking over the mic from Mason today with someone I just know you're going to love. Michelle Battersby. She's the co-founder and CMO of Sunroom, which was recently acquired by Fanfix. Michelle's story is such a good one. From not seeing herself as founder material to building a product that served an overlooked community to leading Sunroom all the way through to a successful acquisition. And now she's stepping into her next chapter as the president of Peanut, the platform where women find friends and advice through pregnancy and motherhood. This episode is a masterclass in courage and finding clarity through the founder journey for anyone thinking about starting something, navigating the messy middle, or wondering when it's time to make the hardest calls. Once you're done listening, I highly recommend checking out my own pod, So Invested, where each week we break down the money conversations that are missing from your group chat. But first, I hope you enjoy listening to this just as much as I enjoyed recording it. Let's dive in. Michelle, congratulations on the acquisition of Sunroom by Fanfix. This was recently announced, but it is all still relatively fresh. I had the pleasure of being down with you in Melbourne in the last few days of the acquisition, and I was just, it might have been stressful for you, but I was loving the chaos of the last couple of days. It's had some time for the dust to settle. How are you feeling about everything now?
Even when you mention those last couple of days, I think I've blocked them from my memory. I can't even remember what was going on. I honestly do feel really happy, and I feel like the response has been good. And I
feel like it's been better than good.
Yeah. I feel honestly just a great sense of freedom, but I don't know if that's what you're meant to say. I guess it felt like a nice ending to quite a hard chapter.
Yeah.
Running Sunroom was very hard, and so it felt really good to be able to get an outcome like that.
Yeah. Can you give us the headlines of what this means for you and also what it means for the Sunroom community?
Yeah, so I guess what it means for me. So Lucy, my co-founder, and I are advising for Fanfix for the next year. Mm-hmm. So we'll be staying in touch with our creators and really helping them have as smooth a transition as possible. We'll still be giving them tips for how to succeed, and we'll also be passing on feedback and strategic ideas to the Fanfix team as well around things that we did that they might be able to integrate and things like that. Yeah. And then was the second part of that, what's it mean for the community? Yeah, so all of our creators, we basically worked on a back-end transition. So all of our data, so creator profiles, content, chat history, anything they'd ever sold in DMs, memberships, all was able to be transitioned over to Fanfix, and creators basically have the option to opt in or opt out. And so we've been working really closely with them to educate them on why we chose Fanfix, why Fanfix might be a better option for them in terms of how much money their earning potential. To be honest, Fanfix have a lot of features that we don't have, much more brand awareness, much more traffic, and we've been doing certain things to expose Sunroom creators in the Fanfix product so that they can benefit from that. So yeah, there's been quite a lot of educating, coaching, workshops, working very closely with the Fanfix creator team, but ultimately it's totally up to our creators if they choose to go or not. And basically at the click of a button, they activate their account on Fanfix, and everything that they had on Sunroom is essentially already over there waiting for them.
Yeah, wow. Have you found that most are taking up the opportunity?
Most want to give it a shot. No one's outright said, I don't like the sound of this. This isn't for me.
I mean, it's like feels like a great opportunity on most accounts, so that's not that surprising.
Yeah, they do have a lot of features that our creators wanted us to build that we also never got to, like live streaming, for example, and they have really sophisticated ways creators can manage their DMs. It was interesting working closely with the Fanfix team on the integration and actually getting an inside look into how they've been able to achieve what they have been able to achieve, and some of their features I was like, fuck, that's good, like we should have done that. But on the flip side, Sunroom also had amazing features that our creators are really missing. Like we had patented anti-screenshot technology, and maybe we'd forgotten a little bit how much that meant to our users. So that has been a bit of a niggly, is that a word? Yeah. I am pregnant. Niggling point that has stopped a few creators, but we've worked out a solution, like kind of example of just things we've been working through. We've worked on a solution where we always knew Fanfix were working on their own version of anti-screenshot, which is another reason why we went with them out of other competitors. So it's not too far off. So we've worked out a way for creators to come over but just hide their profile until the anti-screenshot tech comes in.
Got it. Will Fanfix get that from your platform, or have they only acquired the creators?
They've acquired the creators, not that piece of tech.
Interesting.
But we have connected them with our lead engineer, the engineer who worked on it and filed the patent, to really help them expedite the process, because it took us a year to get right.
Yeah, wow.
It's really hard to implement and to implement effectively. So that's kind of the other good thing about our team still being involved, is we can give them a lot of information.
What is one thing that you want people listening to understand about this acquisition?
Because people are nosy, I think the one thing people want to know is like, what did you sell for? Are you
a millionaire?
Yeah, like, did you make loads of money? Do you get to retire? But working through the acquisition journey was full of so many highs and lows. Like we got very close to getting the company acquired back in February, and then the company we were talking to went through some public legal struggles. So we pulled back from that deal just because on values, ethically, it didn't feel right to keep pursuing it. And that was a major whiplashy moment, because I think Lucy and I had both felt, we'd both started to accept that this chapter might be closing, and I think our brains had started to think about what we would do next, and then we had to go back to the drawing board, and it ended up being a massive blessing in disguise, because we had actually seen how the deal might need to be structured and how you could de-risk it in certain ways, and so we got to shoot our second shot, and we actually got better options and more options to choose from the second time round. But I think that's just one example of what you can go through on the journey to sell a company. And in hindsight, I'm really grateful for that setback, because it also made me realize, fuck, it's actually very hard to just sell a company in any capacity.
Yeah, it probably made you appreciate the outcome like so much more when it actually did happen.
Yeah. And one of our investors had said something like, if you're able to get that acquisition label, it counts for so much as a founder. And I hadn't really thought about it like that. But now that I'm out the other side, I do really appreciate that closing narrative, I guess. And you could have so many different narratives at the end of the day. I actually don't know if there is a bad outcome, because you learn so much and you experience so much. You're inflating your own value, knowledge, wisdom along the way. But I guess that's kind of what I want people to realize, is that at the end of all of this, the thing that actually feels the most amazing is to have a completely clean slate and be able to decide where you can take your career from this point. Yeah. And the interesting thing about that is, like, you don't need to sell a company to be able to do that in your career. You can literally do that whenever you want, but there might just be a bit of an internal, like, getting real with yourself and allowing yourself to kind of go back to square one in order to start again. I don't know. I just feel like very liberated by being able to take my career wherever I want from here.
Yeah. We are going to get much more into everything that you just said because there's so many things I want to discuss. But first of all, I want to take us back 5 years into the early days of Sunroom. I have heard you speak a number of times, and I think it's so important for this audience to hear about how you validated the idea for Sunroom in those early days. Can you talk us through some of the steps that you took in order to basically understand that there was a genuine opportunity here and it could be a really big business?
Yeah. Oh my God. I talk about this a lot, don't I?
I think I made you talk about it a lot.
You've made me talk about it a lot. Yeah.
It's so good though, because I sit in so many conversations with founders and especially early stage.
Yeah.
And we talk about what kind of traction they have. And it can seem like an unfair question in the early days because it's like, well, of course they don't have traction. But actually the way that you talk about it makes it so clear that there are so many ways to prove out your business before even starting the business itself.
Yeah. I think there are probably 3 things you can do to validate an idea before going all in. And they're free, which is amazing. So anyone can do them. And we did a lot of this at Sunroom. So the big one for us, like going back 5 years, the first thing we did was survey people. So we wrote these questionnaires, open-ended questions. We really tried not to project our own assumptions in them and try to like derive a certain kind of answer. So I guess we were quite thoughtful in how we put them together. Although now that I'm out the other side, I don't know, I would question myself on that. But at the time we felt like we were being that way. And started reaching out to people in our network. So it was creators back then, asking them, you know, have you thought about content monetization? What platforms have you thought about? What platforms have you used? What did you like about those platforms? What didn't you like? What's holding you back from like starting, dipping your toe in the water? And each person that we spoke to, we would ask them for intros. So you just get further and further away from your own network. And I think that is crucial. Sometimes, I mean, you're aware of this example. Like I spoke to a founder once who had spent her whole life savings getting an app developed where she hadn't really asked anyone outside her immediate circle if they needed the product. And that just kind of crushes.
Well, your friends and family are always going to pump you up.
Yeah. So surveying is a really big one, and just making sure at the end of every person you speak to, you're asking for an intro, because a warm intro, someone's also way more likely to give you their time. And if anyone's thinking that sounds hard, people really like talking about themselves and their experiences. So getting people to give you feedback and get involved in surveying is like, I've never had an issue with it. So that's the first thing you can do. The second thing you can do is just content generation. I really do think TikTok is an amazing playground for this, because you don't need to have an audience to create a TikTok and have people engage in it. And you could pose hypothetical questions. Like some of the stuff you're putting in this survey, you could also just spin out into TikToks. I have examples of this on my own TikTok where I have just created videos where I've been trying to get feedback. I've got one on there. I was trying to get feedback on how people feel about parasocial relationships. And again, like people like talking about themselves. If you go on TikTok and ask a question in a remotely commanding way, you will be able to get people to engage with it. And TikTok's scary because they'll be brutally honest. Yeah. And they are.
You will find out what they really think.
You will get the feedback. And it can be scary to do that. But I also think pushing yourself through an exercise like that is just a very good way to start to feel how it's going to feel to be a founder, because you do need to be able to show up and speak to audiences online, and you do have to be a bit shameless, and it's kind of a journey to get over that. So starting in any way can be good, but you also could, like, you don't need to like choose a vertical, I don't know if that's the right word, but like choose a medium that makes you feel comfortable. You know, you could also be doing this on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has a great algorithm for like getting beyond your immediate circle as well. You could write a Substack, you just never know. So that's a good one. And then one that I steal from Lucy because it is so freaking good is she had an idea to build another platform before Sunroom. And I think this is so smart. She found all these people who had tried to build products in that space and hit them up on LinkedIn, just cold messages, and asked if they would get on a phone call with her and give them feedback on their experience building in that industry. And she spoke to loads of founders, and she spoke to ex-employees that had worked at those kinds of companies as well. And based on all those conversations, decided like that's not a path I'm going to pursue.
Yeah.
And I just think that's like those are like 3 cheap things. You could honestly execute them in a week to see like what the market is thinking about that.
I love that example of reaching out to people who have tried it before. And in some ways it's like, look, obviously the other people failed. And so you're going to hear a lot of negative things about why it didn't work. But I think that's the way for you to figure out like what is your unique insight here that is going to be different. And it will very quickly become either, okay, this is something I want to run at, or it's not.
Exactly. And also I think just on that point with the like, what is your unique difference? Because I don't know if we'll get to this later in the app, but I do, maybe we will. But I do think like that second point on generating content and putting it out there, I think another thing that can hold people back from that is this fear of what if someone steals my idea?
I was literally going to go there next.
Oh, I'm glad I beat you.
It's like, hear it so often.
Yeah, literally like what if someone steals my idea? Or sometimes I've even had people hit me up and they've asked me to sign an NDA before and I'm like, oh, don't do that. You know, I just think when you show up in those ways online, don't be scared that someone's going to steal your idea. Like there's a side of my brain that's like, if it's that easy to replicate, it's probably not that defensible anyway. And this was going to happen at a point in time regardless. But I also think you're not giving away your like secret when you put that stuff out there. You're kind of just looking for ways to validate what you think this unique insight or secret is that you have, or maybe you end up discovering the secret by putting it out there, and you're killing so many birds with one stone because you're also starting to build allies. And like when you're doing that surveying as well, you're building allies. You're actually collecting people that will be your first users. And when we did our surveying with Sunroom, the huge check box for me was that creators started saying, could I invest in this? And I was like, okay, that is extremely validating. The fact that someone is not only saying they would want a product like this, they need a product like this, but they're actually willing to give me their own money to go and build it. It's like a very good way to start to build your user base, to be honest, and just to like get people very invested in what you're doing and keep them with you along the journey.
We spoke a little bit then about the experience of like putting yourself out there, creating content to test your idea. And I know we've spoken in the past about how it can be quite cringe, especially in the beginning when you feel like you're doing it to no audience and it's like, does anyone even really care? We've had people in the events we've done in the last couple of weeks talk about how it's going to their haters. But I think one of the things that I've heard you speak about before is Adam Grant's approach to idea promotion versus self-promotion. Can you just share a bit more on that?
Yeah, I just saw like a clip from a podcast he'd been on where he literally said just that. He was like, don't view it as self-promotion, view it as idea promotion. And that reframe just like really struck a chord with me. And he basically said that self-promotion, and maybe this is a little bit judgy the way he describes it, to be honest, but I still think it's worth sharing.
Hey, if you want to self-promote, go for it.
Yeah, well, he says, you know, self-promotion is like, look at me, here's selfies of me, look at these awards that I've won. And it's very like you centered and look at me at these events, which that stuff can still be good to share. I think I've shared all of that. But I think if you're struggling with it, like, and again, a way to like build allies. And I also think this is such a great way to think about it for just building a personal brand as well. When you do push content out there, is idea promotion is like look at this thing here's this thing I'm working on and here are all the ways I think it could benefit you. And it's really more about sharing your insights and like what is the benefit to the end user. And I think that can be a way to overcome the cringe. And I also think that can be like really good guidance in terms of just how to think about your content and what you put out there. Like what is the value? And it's kind of more about the product, less about yourself.
Yeah. We first met in the early days of Sunroom when you came on my money podcast, So Invested. And part of the reason why we wanted to get you on is because you were very open about the financial sacrifices that came with becoming a founder and building your own business. What do you think is the biggest misconception about being a founder when it comes to money and finances?
Yeah, I think the biggest misconception is, and this might be slightly unique to building and raising venture capital. So with Sunroom.
That's okay. That is the context in Australia.
Yeah. I think, with Sunroom, we kind of came out of the gate. We raised pre-product, pre-revenue and before we launched. So once people started to hear about what we were doing publicly and it was in the media, the headlines kind of were tied to how much money we'd raised. And I think sometimes when that's what people are reading, and I definitely was sharing it on socials as well because I was proud.
Self-promotion, love it.
Yeah, look at all this money I raised. I think people not in the space, or people that haven't done it, maybe think that you raise that money and like you're actually paying yourself a decent wage. But our starting salary was $55,000. So we were on $55K, which is really hard to live on, especially in LA. And it got bigger over time, but to be completely honest, because I think it is good to be honest about these things, after 5 years, the highest salary Lucy and I ever paid ourselves was $125K, which is so much lower than what we could be getting paid if we were working for someone else.
Yeah.
But you do it because you do have the most to gain as the founder. And I also, I don't know, I need to rethink this thought. I haven't rethought it in a while, but I've always felt like, how many times can I say think? But I've always felt like it's good to work for a founder that's maybe a bit hungry, there's a bit of grit there because they're suffering. But now that I've said it out loud, I'm like, I've also challenged myself on this founder struggle narrative in so many other aspects. I haven't actually gone back to reflect on the financial struggle narrative. So I don't even know if I truly believe that anymore, or maybe if we were a bit too hard on ourselves financially, maybe we actually could have done a bit more for ourselves. And maybe it's a female thing as well. One of the things I think Lucy and I struggled with is, I know for me personally, I almost felt like I needed someone to give me permission to spend the money. It's a very weird feeling seeing that much money come into a bank account and it's yours to control when you've never experienced that before in your life. And you can feel a lot of guilt around spending it, especially because when we first raised, it was from a lot of angels and people that I personally knew. And so when money would leave the bank account, I'd be thinking oh, that's so-and-so's. If 30K left the account and I knew the person who gave us 30, I'd be oh, that's Maddy's 30K. And so there's this I don't know if other people feel like that.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think in some ways it's a really good thing because so much of doing a startup is about being frugal and being really good with your money and moving quickly and learning quickly. But a lot of companies do burn way too much cash too quickly, and that can be to their detriment. But I also completely see what you're saying on the flip side, which is maybe you went too far the other way.
Yeah, I think we actually, in hindsight, spent money on the wrong things. I think we did get our team right. I guess to come back to the misconception, it's you raise money to hire people smarter than you and to be able to bring them in on salaries where you can attract and retain that sort of talent. And I do think there is a bit of a misconception around what you're doing as the founder. But I don't know, I feel if I wasn't comfortable to say what we were paying ourselves out loud like this, then we probably would have been paying ourselves too much. So I think we probably did do it right, but that was 5 years on being on what is well below what our market rates would have been. And it's also 5 years off the back of us both having these pretty amazing roles in other companies where we could have commanded much bigger salaries. So there definitely is, I guess it's just one of the sacrifices you can make. Like maybe that's the one we really chose to make.
Did you come to have any feelings of resentment about that? Like, because looking back, you know, like you said, you could have been earning like a lot of money in that time. How are like the emotions around that now?
Yeah, I honestly haven't thought about it for long enough. I definitely had moments where I'm like, Lucy and I never even spoke about giving ourselves raises that often. Like we literally had the conversation twice over 5 years.
Like, I really need more money right now.
Yeah, but we both, there was a lot of like being able to, like knowing we were both in it together really helped. Like we would have very honest conversations around like when we would miss a payroll accidentally because like we would have fucked something up on the system, not because we didn't have money, like we would have messed something up. We'd be texting, and because we both knew we were both living paycheck to paycheck, we'd be like, she'd be like, I'm going to Venmo both of us just so we can both pay rent. And like we would have to just Venmo ourselves out of a different account. I don't want to sound like I think I'm so hard done by, you know, but we were both living paycheck to paycheck because 5 years is quite a long time to, I guess, go through that.
Do you feel like looking back, there are things that you missed out on, you know, holidays or other things that you could have been doing with your family, with your friends, with your life that you didn't? I guess not so much like because of the company, but because of the money side?
I guess what helped was like going into Sunroom, Lucy and I had great careers, so we both had savings. One thing I really wasn't willing to sacrifice as much was my lifestyle. Maybe that was a smart move, maybe that wasn't, but I could definitely sustain living in a certain way alongside these smaller salaries for a while, which probably helped me like not resent it as much. But yeah, I think in terms of missing out, it's more the mindset of being in your 30s and kind of going back to living paycheck to paycheck, where you have these moments where you're like, fuck, you know, like, is this worth it? And it's like now that I'm at the end, it's not like I think it's worth it because I got this huge amount of money in my bank account or anything like that happened. The thing that I had always been most curious to test was, if I struggle through this, if I make it through this, if I commit to this and reach some kind of outcome, where can I take my career from here? Like I have a belief that I will be able to go wherever I want and command what I deserve once I make it through. And so once we got to the end of this, that's what I was most interested in testing. Like I've always felt it doesn't matter if I fail because I will have learnt so much. Something big will be waiting for me on the other side. And then once I got to that point, I did panic because I was like, well, now it's time to test my theory. And what if I'm not desirable? What if I can't find the next thing that's very fulfilling and actually proves this theory of mine to be true? And so that's why sitting here right now, having like landed I've started a new job, and I honestly would describe it as my dream role at a dream company. I just feel like the struggle was totally worth it. And you will be very surprised. Well, maybe not even surprised. Like you'll just be kind of rewarded by what you can step into next.
Yeah. We're going very off script, but I'm just going to run with it.
Yeah.
Throughout kind of this acquisition process, there were a number of things on the table, and through that came a number of job opportunities for what you were going to do next. Can you maybe talk through like that exact experience of figuring out and realizing your worth and ultimately ending up where you have now, joining Peanut?
Yeah. So it was interesting because it all needed to happen in private because we were still working through the terms of this deal and working with the integration. So that made it unique because we knew that it was coming to an end. But we couldn't publicly say that. It's not like we could really go and just apply for jobs.
Like update your LinkedIn to like looking for work.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So both Lucy and I spent a lot of time just sitting and reflecting, and I started to think about, what other problems I was interested in, if maybe consulting was something that I wanted to do. I am pregnant, so I was wondering, how is the timing of all of this going to align, and do I need to maybe take a pause or things like that. But as we were going through the acquisition process, one of the companies we were speaking with was a larger social platform, and they were predominantly interested in us as maybe an acqui-hire. And what ended up happening was Lucy and I kind of went through a bit of an interview process with them. And from my perspective, the thing I was curious about, kind of bringing it back to my theory, is could I even get a job offer from a place like this? What would I be leveled at a company like this? What would a salary look like? And I went into it more from a confidence building perspective, which was also really scary, because I was thinking, what if I can't land this? Again, it starts to play with your self-doubt a little bit. But that ended up being a really good experience, because it resulted in offers that created a bit of a safety net. I guess it allowed a bit of my worry about the timing of when everything would fall into place to subside. But at the same time, I also reached out to one of our investors, a woman called Michelle Kennedy, who was on the board at Bumble when I worked there, and she went on to found her own platform for mothers called Peanut. And I ended up catching up with her, just not knowing where the conversation would go. And she ended up suggesting that, I should come and work at Peanut and help lead them through this next growth phase that they're going through. I feel like I'm semi-cagey about all of this, and I'm like, I can talk about it.
But I know, well, it's been 12 months in private and it's finally out in the open.
Yeah, it was that period of time was very challenging, because we weren't free to leave, but we were having to present ourselves and put our best foot forward to get certain offers on the table. But I think it ended up being a really good confidence setting exercise, and it also helped me realize what I could be getting in these bigger companies and what I would be leveled at. And that was quite a rewarding experience, because it did help test this theory out, which has just left me feeling like there's just no such thing as failure if you start a company and give it a crack. I just think it's really respected, and it allows you to bring really unique experience to the drawing board when, I don't know, if going back into business afterwards is something that you want to do. But that's also something I was trying to figure out. Could I go and work for someone else? And I ended up reaching the conclusion that I probably couldn't go to a bigger company at this point in my career. I feel like I'd feel very annoyed. And, having to ask for permission to do things. Yeah. I think would be a bit of a difficult transition. So this role at Peanut is more of a leadership role. It's president of the company. And I just felt like if I was to go into a business, that is 100% the kind of role that I need to be going into. And I would love to take on a role like that under the wing of someone like Michelle, who's a seasoned CEO, just to, I don't know, absorb information from someone who's been doing it longer than I have.
You talk about those moments of self-doubt and not knowing your worth when you come out the other end of doing Sunroom. How do you navigate those moments? Because I think a lot of people really resonate with that feeling of what am I doing? I don't know what my worth is. How do you kind of, get through that?
It was honestly a pretty hard period. I journaled a lot. I also did daily card pulls on ChatGPT.
Oh my gosh. Nice.
Which shows where my headspace was at, not overly stable.
I have a colleague at Blackbird who is going to just love that you just said that.
Yeah, honestly, they're so good. It really stopped me from going over the edge. I think the hard thing was, once I had spoken to Michelle about this role at Peanut, my heart was so set on it. I just knew it was the thing I needed to do, and I desperately wanted it to work out. but so much wasn't in my control when it came to the timing of everything. And so I did have to do quite a lot of self-talk to almost convince myself that it was going to be okay. But I think in terms of when you're working through that self-doubt, like the only way to overcome it is just to start working on what could be the potential outcome, and like talking to people in your network. Like I kind of had other things bubbling away as well. Like I did have some consulting opportunities. I did have other jobs that I was interested in, or like people I was chatting to about opportunities in their team. And even though they weren't necessarily things I actually wanted to do, they were good to, I don't know, how do I describe it? It's kind of nice knowing that you do have some fallback options, even if you can't find the thing that feels like soul aligned and right at the time. So it might not always work out, I guess, as fast as it did in my situation, even though it was like a long time coming. But I think the only thing you can really do is start the process.
I think I've told you this, but sometimes when I'm having self-doubt at work, I ask myself, what would Michelle do?
Oh God.
I just feel like you're so good at the way you like think about things and the way you like approach stuff. I don't know. I find it gives me answers in terms of like how I present myself, I think is the biggest thing.
I mean, I don't know if it's good or bad that you do that, Maddy.
Your co-founder, Lucy, is a product person.
Yeah.
And she designed Hinge. And in her role as CEO of Sunroom, she designed a lot of the product that ended up being Sunroom, or that was Sunroom. You, a marketing expert, built Bumble from the start, from the very beginning in APAC. I would love to know what you imagined your role as CMO of Sunroom being like when you started, and then looking back now, what was it like in reality?
When you imagine what your role could look like at the beginning of starting a company, you're dreaming really big. Like you're kind of seeing the headlines that you want, you're seeing the brand partnerships that you want, and you need to think like that to go all in and to also sell the vision. So you need to be thinking really big. My day-to-day role ended up being so different to a CMO role. I essentially played a sales role for 5 years. I think both Lucy and I couldn't have imagined how much of a sales type business creator economy platforms like this actually are. There's so much outreach. There's constant ideation on how you can get in front of the right people, on the comms that you're using, on the selling points. And so it became incredibly repetitive for me. I spent like day in, day out talking to creators, especially in those first couple of years. My days would literally look like 8 back-to-back calls, to the point where my partner would be able to recite the script, or like he'd overhear me and be like, that sounded like a good one, like, and yeah, I think it's the sales side of it that surprised me the most. And I can definitely play that role, but it's not necessarily what I enjoy doing. And I think that's something all founders have to navigate. Like you do have to do things you don't like doing, and you do have to be able to wear many hats. I guess one of the benefits of doing that is I became so close to the user, and it became very easy for me to read like certain things they would want or didn't want, and I kind of knew how to like spin the pitch in a way that would really appeal to them. But it didn't feel like a marketing role at the end of the day. And all the marketing work that we did at Sunroom was like very internally driven. So it was a lot of education, content campaigns, coaching, and almost acting like our creators' talent agent, because we attracted a lot of micro creators who didn't have representation, which was actually a cool part of Sunroom, because it meant that we could actually offer revenue generating opportunities to creators that otherwise wouldn't find them. But it definitely changed the scope of my role and of anyone who kind of came on to what was the marketing team, but it was really like a creator team.
I can imagine, especially coming off the back of your Bumble experience as well, where essentially your role was to like play as big as possible from a marketing perspective in Australia with that brand.
Yeah, it definitely felt like I was playing in a different pool. again, like there are pros and cons. I didn't really get to play as big as I have in other brands. And Lucy and I have had very candid conversations about this where I've said, you're so lucky because you got to do your best work. You got to design a beautiful product, a really full feature set. You got to solve all these intriguing problems within the product. I feel like my role was a little bit more confined because of where we got to on like our growth trajectory, but also because our brand was a little bit edgier. So we had, and I mean, I even hate saying that, like the fact that our brand is considered edgy, it annoys me. It shows the stigma that exists out there. But because we allowed, slightly more sensual content, that also limited the kinds of brands we could partner with, which is such a massive shame. Our brand was so powerful and helped us get to where we got the platform to, but it also created a ceiling where like it stopped us from being able to reach many different other categories of creators, and it ended up impacting our growth, which is something we just couldn't have guessed at the time we started, and I don't think is a reflection necessarily of our work, product, our amazing creators. It's more a reflection of society. I think we thought society would shift a little bit more with us and also recognize that like a woman's boobs aren't offensive, but we haven't quite got there.
Shame.
Yeah.
Talking about Sunroom's growth, you have said before that Sunroom is a business that objectively works, but that never quite reached escape velocity. What do you mean by that?
I'm like, I said this to you in the car. Yeah. It's something that Lucy and I have spoken about, and I think we'd both be comfortable sharing it, and it kind of like segues nicely off what I was talking about before, in that I think we overestimated the size of what this market could have been. It ended up being much more niche than we could have predicted. And that still helped us build an incredible business. Like we raised money 3 times, we could grow up until a certain point, and then it felt like we had almost maxed out of our category. And this is something that we've seen happen to other platforms in our space as well. Like there was another competitor of ours called Fanhouse, and they attracted a whole bunch of gamers, and then it was like they couldn't quite get beyond that, and maybe it's because that's what they became known for. And so it's a really interesting place. It's kind of a hard place to get to with a business, because you have all these early signs of success and all this amazing early growth where you're growing month on month, at a pretty good rate. And then it stopped in our case. Like we kind of just got to this level where it was really quite flat, and we kept trying to break out of this pocket that we had discovered, but nothing we were doing was working. And it was very frustrating from my perspective, because I'd be sitting there thinking, if I could get all these women and they can achieve X, why can't I just go get 1,000 more? Like if they could make it work, why can't all these other people? Like Lucy and I, so many times we would kind of get to this point of thinking, maybe this is it. But then we'd be like, but it can't be it because we did this. And I still haven't really worked through those thoughts yet. I truly believe we left no stone unturned. Like there was absolutely nothing more we could have tried. I think there are probably some things we did at the start which maybe affected the end. Like we actually ended up getting quite headstrong in terms of who we thought was going to be the user of the product and what they needed. And I think we launched with an overly sophisticated product where we were trying to reach feature parity with the other products that existed at that time. But what we've seen is like you really don't need that good a product to actually gain success in this space. And we really felt like we needed to build an app because that's what we were hearing from our creators that they wanted. But, we've just sold to Fanfix, who are meant to have paid out $1 billion to creators by the end of next year, and they don't have an app.
Really?
Yeah, they don't have an app.
Wow.
Yes. And I think that just shows, and I mean, even when we look at our payments, I think we ended up getting to a place where maybe 70 or 80% of our payments were on web. It was quite high as opposed to on the app. So it kind of gives you an indication that, you know, a lot of people are happy just browsing. I do think apps make the creator experience better, but I think we probably could have got to market faster, saved a hell of a lot on engineering. Like that was the one place where we did make, I don't know, we just had a lot of setbacks on the engineering front, and we ended up spending a lot of money on contractors because our product was taking so long to build. But we quickly learned that once you bring on a whole bunch of contractors, your code is actually incredibly messy. There's kind of less ownership and care on certain pieces of the product. So we had to do a lot of rebuilding. So I think like when I talk about the validating piece as well, I actually think we could have started just with a web-based product, eliminated quite a lot of our features that ended up becoming relatively unused, and got to market faster. So that's kind of one thing, and we would have ended up with way more money on the other side. But I also think when people first came to the product, something that I noticed was that a lot of like everyday women were coming on who weren't influencers, almost wanting to use it like it was close friends or their own private locked Instagram. And I remember having like little thoughts at the time, like, oh, this would be interesting to experiment with. You know, maybe this is something that's a little bit more social appy. Maybe people are really longing for a women-founded social platform that's like for their own little micro community, and it's not about mass reach. I don't know. These are just like, I never fully allowed myself to think about it because we were so set on, but we're a monetization platform. We need to make money. And so we quickly killed things like being able to follow people for free, and just kind of kept going down this path that we were quite set on. So, but also if we did those things, maybe it would have failed the year after, and we would have completely run out of our money. Like I actually don't know. But I do think if I was to do it again, once we got to that point of actually having launched and actually having a product out in the market, I would have really tried to shut down every personal opinion and assumption that I held, and just just watch it for a bit. Like just sit and kind of watch it for longer than we did, rather than like forcing people to use the product in a certain way, or just like, I don't know, like staying a little bit more committed to the original vision. Like maybe you need to be a little bit more fluid than we were.
I think one reason why I really wanted to ask you about that escape velocity point is because what I've seen in the founders that I meet, and I want to say this probably leans more towards female founders as well.
Yeah.
Kicking.
Yeah.
Love.
I'm being abused.
I appreciate this is an audio podcast, but Michelle is just touching her stomach because she's got a baby in there kicking.
Yeah.
I do feel like there is this sense that sometimes people count themselves out of venture capital for the fear of what it would look like to not achieve essentially that quote unquote escape velocity, like to not achieve the $1 billion vision of the business. And look, I think what I would say to that is like you have to have the $1 billion vision, which you guys did. You knew what the really big version of Sunroom looked like. But the reality is like in venture capital investing, like we invest in lots of different companies. And the whole idea is that one or two succeed and become really big and the rest don't. And I think sometimes we don't talk about those ones that don't enough. And as a result, people almost count themselves out of even trying to begin with.
Yeah. Do you want me to read the LinkedIn post?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
We were talking about context. We were talking about a LinkedIn post that was really good before we got on mic. So let's do it.
Okay. I'll read where this escape velocity came from. And I do want to call out, like, feel like we're talking a lot about the hard truths, and maybe I'll make sure we get to like the positives.
Yeah. Well, no, but I think this is the whole thing, right? It's like Sunroom was an objectively great business with founders who did like incredibly well, and now you've had this incredible exit. So I think it's actually kind of nice to, behind all these like amazing headlines for the outcome that you guys have had, is to like, talk about what it was really like and what's happened.
Yeah. So this LinkedIn post says, the most tragic companies aren't the ones that fail fast. They're the ones that succeed just enough to trap talented founders for years, making enough progress to stay alive, but never achieving escape velocity. And
it hits pretty heavy.
Yeah, it does. And I'd never really been able to describe how it felt. And to your point, and like Lucy and I we've spoken about that LinkedIn post so many times and like reminded each other of it, because we were both like, trap talented founders for years. And how previously I was talking about that very frustrating feeling of like, if all these women over here are doing it, why can't we just go get 1,000 more, And that is kind of like what comes up when I read that, because I would often think, how would it have felt if this just never worked at all? Like if we raised money and it failed within a year and we had absolutely no success, what would that feel like compared to what we ended up going through? Well, I kind of came to the conclusion that even being trapped for years,
quote unquote,
no, like I just kind of look at this outcome now and where I'm able to take my career next, and I'm like, God, it was so worth it. Like it was so worth the struggle, and it was really hard. Like Sunroom was hard the entire time. Like it was a grind to grow, and those 8 back-to-back creator calls a day, like constantly searching for these people that would find success on our platform. And I relate to that. I relate to, I think she says, the most tragic companies.
Oh dear.
and it's weird, and like I don't know if I should admit this, but it does like really kind of, like it really resonates. And for me to say it really resonates, but for me to say I'm so happy and grateful and glad I had the experience, I think maybe says a lot, that even though it was really hard, it was so worth it, and I definitely do it again. And I would, put myself through the same sacrifices over and over. And even though, and I guess, we're also talking about Sunroom from the perspective that I think it would have felt very different if we didn't raise capital and we weren't looking at all of our achievements on a venture scale. That's also the weird thing that I've been toying with, is like, this was a successful business that made loads of money, but it didn't reach that venture scale. So you do feel like, oh, we didn't achieve what we set out to achieve.
Yeah.
So it kind of like messes with your sense of pride, perhaps, because we did have much bigger, we thought we could take it so much further. We thought it could be an OnlyFans competitor. We thought it could be, it's like you're a creator, you're on Instagram, you're on TikTok, you've got a Linktree, you've got a Sunroom. We kind of thought it could be that piece of a creator's ecosystem of the platforms that they use. And so there's that side that's like, oh, we couldn't do it. But then there's the other side that's like, but we did it for so many women, and so many, we had creators earning like $500,000 on Sunroom. We had creators quitting their jobs, putting themselves through college, paying their rent, their car insurance. We had messages all the time like, this product means so much to me. And in the aftermath of selling it, like we've had creators cry to us about how sad they are to see it go, and that's really meaningful. So this is why I'm in a very torn.
Yeah.
I feel a whole range of different things about it.
I mean, I guess it's the dark side of having that huge, huge ambition. But now that all is said and done, it's almost like you can step back and think, yes, but all of that you did achieve, and like all the creators' lives that you did change, never would have happened if it weren't for that huge ambition of like, we are going to build the Sunroom to the Linktree, Instagram, TikTok.
Yeah, and it's probably worth me mentioning, like I just internally kind of giggled because like I'm sitting here talking about it from like what might be quite a harsh perspective. Like I do have like pretty high standards for myself, you know, and Lucy and I both had like very big ambitions for this. It's probably worth noting like I'm the kind of person where if you came second, you lost. Yeah. You didn't come second, you lost. So I think that is like might be also worth knowing about me. Like I could so easily sit here and paint like the most polished, positive story about this if I wanted to.
It would all be true.
Yes, it actually would. Yeah.
And it is. Like that is the reality, yeah.
Yeah. I could like 100% not go into any of this and I could just focus on the bright side. But I think it's good to get into the nitty-gritty of it because there is so much I've found challenging. Like there's so much Lucy and I battled through and still feel happy about it at the end of the day.
I don't know if I have a question here, so I'm just going to talk and see what you come back with. But one of the things that, I mean, I love most about my job, but also that I wish people would just do more of is like raising their ambition and thinking bigger. Like sometimes I think when I speak to female founders versus male founders, there is this dynamic of like the men can just, and generalizing majorly here, can just back themselves a bit more to be like, yeah, this can be $1 billion business. Like, yes, this can be massive. And I think sometimes when I chat to female founders, there's this more like, oh, I need to like prove it out first. And like, I'll start in Australia and I'll test it and I'll see how it goes. And then maybe we'll expand to the next country. And it's kind of like, I actually don't think there's any difference in terms of the outcome when you imagine what the $1 billion business vision could look like. But that's what opens so many doors, is just like communicating that version of the business rather than taking it step by step to maybe eventually get there. Does that make any sense?
No, it does. And even as you're saying that, it's like, I think Lucy and I we clearly were capable of selling the big vision because that's what allowed us to make, like to raise capital. But even when you're describing that, I can then remember being in it and having launched and doing a lot of what you were just describing. Like, oh no, we can't go get the creators with this amount of followers just yet because our product has all these bugs, you know, and it needs to be better for them and it needs to be more perfect for them. I think like that was also another thing that we got wrong. And like now that we've kind of done this huge sweep looking at all of our competitors and really digging into their products, I've just realized, oh God, they just have fucking gone for it and they don't care at all if this isn't the standard's not here, and it's helped them get ahead.
Yeah.
So I think there's probably this like perfectionist element. And actually I went to an event the other night and I saw Hannah Ferguson speak, and she said something which could be a good takeaway for any woman listening. She said, if you're a woman, if it's an 85% yes, then it's a yes. Like, don't wait for it to be 100% because it's probably not going to get there. So 85% is like, yep, that's your tick and that's get going. But I don't know, you would know more than me about the differences in pitching that you see from men and women.
Yeah, I think sometimes my biggest question to female founders, and again, like I want to emphasize how much I'm generalizing here, but when I'm speaking to them and they're sharing their vision for the business, and it's like they might be talking about, oh, like, you know, we'll start with these customers and then eventually, hopefully we'll start pitching or like we'll start selling to these customers. And it's like, you know, often the local smaller businesses first and then later you start to go to the bigger businesses. And I always think, I'm like, why not just start there? Like just go see. And they might say no, they probably will, but you'll learn something from that. Or you'll start to form those connections, which means that in another 12 months or 18 months when you go back to them, it's like there's already that groundwork laid. I don't know, that's just one small example, but I think I'm just constantly being like, why not? Just like, what's the bigger version look like? And just do it.
Yeah. I wonder, and like, I don't know if this is something that Blackbird does, but I do, how I mentioned before that like even once we'd raised money, I was almost looking for someone to give me permission to spend it. I feel like I probably should have brought like more mentors in, and actually, I don't know, our investors really like left us alone. And so we would send a monthly update, once a month. And if we asked for something specific, they would help. But I like probably needed a guide, to be honest, like a buddy.
Yeah.
I probably needed someone like assigned to me. And I probably should have objectively looked for this myself.
No, but sometimes when you're in it, right, you don't realize that that's what you're doing because you're living it. And it's only with the benefit of hindsight that you can realize that.
So I don't know, maybe that's something people need.
So now that you're at the end of the Sunroom journey, how do you reflect on the last 5 years, and how do you think about or define what success means?
The Sunroom journey has completely changed my perception, definition, idea of success. I think, to be brutally honest, going into this, I probably was more driven by what financial outcome will I reach on the other side, if I'm being totally frank. I don't know, maybe because I'd worked for a unicorn, I kind of had these big ideas and big dreams about what running my own company could look like. I, of course, also wanted to work on a mission that I cared about. Like, I would not be able to show up. I wouldn't have been able to survive if I wasn't passionate about it and if I didn't feel like I was putting good work out into the world. But that's probably a part of how my idea of success has changed. Like, to get to the end of this and to have that moment where you can take everything that you've learned over that 5-year period and go on to do whatever you want to do next is the most, I think I said it at the start, like liberating feeling I've ever had in my career. Your founder journey doesn't have to land you on like the biggest scale ever for you to be able to take that and go wherever you want. I also think to survive running your own business for 5 years, like putting that good work out into the world and having those creators in our DMs daily sharing the impact of the product was also the most fulfilling part. Like, if you're actually doing good work, it's amazing how long you can survive off what felt like smaller wins at the time. They can actually be quite fueling. But I don't know, like I don't know if there's more I need to say, like if there's another way I can sum it up to be a bit more succinct. Do you know what? There's this Matthew McConaughey quote. Have you read Green Lights?
I have. I listened to the audiobook specifically because that is the only way to consume that book.
Yeah, so he says this one thing in Green Lights where he was like, it's not about winning or losing, it's do you accept the challenge?
Oh,
do you know that line?
Yeah. So good.
And when I heard that, as the kind of person I am where like second place is a loss to me, it really like also struck me. And, I've kind of spoken a lot in this about wanting to have done more, but that even though we couldn't quite reach the original vision, I'm still so happy and I'd totally do it again. And I like can't believe what I'm going on to do next. And I just I never would have got this if I hadn't have done that. Like, I look at my career and all the roles that I've had, and there's just no way I'd be in the position I am now if I had stayed where I was and kind of worked my way up a corporate ladder. I just don't think. I think like taking risks really pays off, and it does not matter if your risk is a win or a loss.
I think choosing to start your own business and to go on that founder journey is inherently risky. What would you say you've learned about yourself over the last 5 years in making those decisions? Where do I start?
Honestly, because so much happened. Like, I also became a mum, which is a really interesting thing to navigate off the back of having raised money, running your own business, existing in the US. But I honestly am a completely different person. And I think going into this startup journey, I did have a very fixed mindset on what success looked like. And I was being driven by kind of wanting to say I could do hard things, like raise capital, start a tech company, get it off the ground, sell it, these are
tick, tick, tick.
But I think as I have grown, I have realised that success actually isn't as black and white as what I thought it once was. And I was definitely much more fixed to what are the headlines, what are, those big glossy wins. And out the other side of this, I'm definitely making decisions with my heart and being really confident about that, probably for the first time ever, as opposed to my head. And I have really been thinking more about like what the day-to-day work looks like and what will be really fulfilling and really fueling for me, and to kind of take all this experience, package it up and channel it into something that just feels very soul aligned and very meaningful.
Well, what a beautiful note to end on. Michelle, Blackbird is so proud to have backed you and Lucy and to have watched you guys over the last 5 years in what has been an incredible success for you both, and now like such an incredible outcome as well.
Thanks. I love Blackbird.
Well, I can tell you internally, like I've had the privilege of being able to work with you on different events over the last 6 to 12 months. And like whenever I post about these events internally, everyone is just like, Michelle, what a legend. Like, we are so excited for you guys and for what you are going to do next. And so we will just be staying tuned. And if Peanut ever wants to raise money, let us know.
I will. I'll be coming knocking.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I was going to say good luck for the future. And goodbye.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Wild Hearts. If you want to learn more from other ambitious people building, designing, and creating the world that we all want to live in, then please hit the subscribe and follow button. It would mean the world to us, the founders, the operators, and the investors who join us on Wild Hearts. This podcast is a labor of love from the Blackbird team and day one. The show is produced by Camilla Herring and Melia Rayner at Blackbird. Our marketing genius is Eva Telemakis, and our editors are from day one, Annie Jones and Sanjay Chabaria. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.